Okay. And so now for me, just so you all know, your little tiles are very small and I really cannot see you hardly at all. So if you have questions, go ahead and shout out. So the slides here for this slide deck are for both the budget workshop, which is the second one, and the CRF workshop, which is the first one. Sorry, I did them in reverse order, but that's because where they overlap, it works out better this way. We're not going to talk in this session about the budget process. That's the second workshop. This workshop is about where we are in terms of CRF, coronavirus relief funding. So I'm going to skip through the first few slides, I'm happy to talk with you all about that at some other time. You can call me, you can email me, text me, we can set up a session, or you'll hear more about that this afternoon, or the second session later this morning. So we're going to skip ahead to this slide because this is where the CRF reality really begins. And the CRF reality is that there are multiple processes happening all at the same time. And that's part of what makes this so monstrously confusing. So there was the normal budget adjustment process, which happens in January through February. There's the normal budget process, which we think is going to go through May, but may be extended, or there may be an additional session in the summer and the fall. There are also actions on the federal money that are done by the Joint Fiscal Committee. There's a whole complex series of reasons why the Joint Fiscal Committee is part of this. I'm not going to go into the details, but I'll talk more about them in a moment. And then there may be additional bills, like one that's being considered right now, H315, that has other appropriations stuck onto it, that they're just kind of not suspending the rules, but suspending the norms and doing extra appropriations at different times. So when it seems to you like those of us who are in the building are scrambling to try to track what's going on, this is why. Because there's so many different tracks that the money is flowing down. Because of all this, there are 3 budgeting committees that you need to be considering for those of you who are doing advocacy and want to get directly involved. There's the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Appropriations Committee. You see them listed here. There are some changes from the past. So if you're looking for the usual cast of characters, some of our old friends are still there, like Senator Dick Sears, but there are some new people like Senator Baruth. Senator Ballant is on. It's become the norm for the pro tem to be on appropriations. And on the House, there's been quite a bit of changeover with a new chair, new ranking member, and some new members of the committee, Representative Harrison, Representative Schy, Representative Squirrel, Representative Toleno. So a lot of changes on the House committee. There's this third group, the Joint Fiscal Committee. As you'll see from the abbreviations, the Joint Fiscal Committee is made up of senior members of the money committees, as well as a couple add-ons. The Joint Fiscal Committee is really supposed to be the housekeeping committee that does financial work when the legislature is not in session in a typical year. So when money things have to be dealt with, when grants come in that need to be approved, that sort of thing, this is the group that's supposed to do really kind of, just kind of basic business stuff, not anything very complicated. But because of what's going on with the federal money coming in, they've taken on an enhanced role, and they are now responsible for approving some of the money that the legislature and the administration have decided don't need a full legislative review. So you may hear us referring to Joint Fiscal. That's not the Joint Fiscal Office. Usually, well, sometimes when people say Joint Fiscal, they mean the Joint Fiscal Office, which is the staff that evaluates money issues for the legislature. Sometimes they refer to the Joint Fiscal Committee. Sometimes people say JFC. This is sort of a strange little backwater of the process that's suddenly risen to prominence. Let me pause there just really briefly. Shayla, if you'd help. Does anyone have any questions about that structural stuff that we just talked about? Again, there's plenty of time for discussion and questions here. So if you have a question, please go ahead and chime up.
And I would say probably don't use the hand raise function because we can't actually see you all very well right now. So just yell it out or pop the questions in the chat.
Bonus points for using the hand raise, but sadly we can't see it. Okay, so we'll keep going. So what has happened? The first thing I want to do is point to the yellow, I think it's yellow, that bright box in the bottom. I promise you I've missed something. I promise you this is not complete, and I apologize in advance. It is impossible for anyone to follow every single aspect of this, but I've done my best to collect the information in one place. So here's what's happened so far. There have been several relief packages. Several were passed in last year in 20. For our state, they're mostly but not fully spent. Most of the spending in the 20 packages is not described here. For the most part, it was a pretty straightforward process. We're just not going to get into it though, for all sorts of reasons. It gets a lot more complicated in 21. There are a number of reasons why. First, there were changes in the rules. Obviously, there was a change of administration. There was also just the usual normal working through a complex system and refinements along the way. So there were some changes in how money could be spent, and some money actually came back to us. And we're starting to get what started happening in January is that things started having domino or ripple effects that impacted lots of different funding streams. So it got really complicated really fast. There are different sources of funds that are being allocated by the legislature this year. And I'll read these, but you can see them on the screen. They're the unspent funds where the deadline got extended. There are unspent funds that can be reallocated. There are newly available funds because of the FEMA match change, so that FEMA, we were supposed to have a state match of 25%, but then that changed and then we had a state match of 0% retroactively. So a whole bunch of money got released into the system that had different restrictions and requirements. A lot of it had no requirements at all, that the legislature is trying to figure out what to do with. There was some reallocation of general funds that became newly available, because what the legislature is constantly trying to do is use these one-time only funds to displace the sorry, tech glitch. So what the legislature is constantly trying to do is find ways to displace base funds and use one-time funds during the fiscal year, which frees up general fund money to use still for a one-time purpose, but it is totally unrestricted. So that has all sorts of ripple effects as well. And then we got a pulse of money from the December 20 federal relief funds, some of which are already going out the door, some of which haven't even started yet. Like, as we'll hear about, the CCFAP pulse from December that hasn't hit yet at all. And there are also actions that Congress just did that doesn't require any action on the state's part. Again, really complicated, really hard to keep things straight. Any questions about that? Okay. So there are three big, oh, was someone asking a question?
Sorry, this is Floyd.
Yes.
Quick question. So do we know what the totals are of these unspent CRF 20 funds and where they're being allocated to?
The short answer is no. Steve Klein in the Joint Fiscal Office probably has a spreadsheet that totals them. But honestly, this is a good sort of leading question. Apologies for the phone ringing in the background. I'm not able to make that go away. The total probably doesn't matter. That none of us are asking for, well, actually I should take that back. It probably matters if you're doing one of the major housing initiatives. If the housing initiatives, a lot of them are infrastructure, so they're one time and they're huge investments, right? We want to get tens of millions of dollars into redeveloping housing, building new housing, doing improvements, infrastructure, nuts and bolts, hammer and nails kind of stuff, perfect for CRF. And some of those are lots and lots and lots of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. Short of that, what most of us are concerned about are pretty small pieces. Honestly, I don't even worry about how much money there is because no one really knows and it doesn't really matter, which sounds really callous, but from an advocacy point of view, don't go down that rabbit hole. You're just wasting your time. I think that's really the takeaway as I'm listening to myself talk. The takeaway is focus on your ask. Don't get distracted by how much money there is. Focus on what you're trying to follow and just pay attention to that. Does that answer your question, Floyd? Great. Okay. I see you have a companion there in your area, Floyd. I will note a little humor here.
Yeah, it's cold out, but we're good.
He's got his hands right on your back. Is he giving you a back rub? Looks like a haircut, maybe. Yes, I know. It's yes. Sorry, little humor. You guys you don't get to hear my bad jokes in person, so you get to hear them virtually. All right, moving on. So there are three big pieces that are happening that are sort of in process right now. The Joint Fiscal Committee released a whole bunch of housing funds, what I was just referring to, a whole bunch of housing funds in February. VT Digger has an excellent article on this. There are other news outlets that have coverage of this. It's huge. I don't begin to understand it all. And if it's done well, it will have an enormous long-term impact on people who are experiencing homelessness in our community. Let's keep our fingers crossed that we really do the good work that this is going to be able to help with. There was also a bunch of money that was put in the Budget Adjustment Act. Remember, I mentioned that is one of the possible ways of doing business. The Budget Adjustment Act is, in normal times, a fairly routine bill that is passed at the beginning of each session to move money around. Remember, we're halfway through the fiscal year at that point. There are always changes that occur. There are always things that happen. Grants come in, programs run hot, programs run cold. Money gets moved around. It's usually pretty routine. In this climate, it's anything but routine. They use it as a vehicle to stuff all sorts of things into it. You can see some of the things that were in the budget adjustment from this current year. That's referred to as FY21, because remember, this is the 21 fiscal year. The 22 fiscal year starts in July. The third big action is what's happening right now. And this information that's on here is out of date. I had this as of Friday. It's already changing, but sorry, I can't control the Senate. So H315, that was Mary Hooper's emergency bill that the House Appropriations Committee put together to get as much money out the door as they could. It's a mishmash of all sorts of different things. Unlike a normal bill, I have no idea what the envelope of spending is, how much money they have to spend, because yesterday afternoon, great work, Amanda, the Senate Appropriations Committee and Floyd, thanks to their good work, the Senate Appropriations Committee just stuffed $82,000 into it to support the diaper bank for the rest of the calendar year. I don't know where that money comes from. I don't know why they thought they had it. They did, and they stuck it in the bill, in their version of the bill. Great news. Good news for all families and children in Vermont. I don't know. It's very strange to be so cavalier about expenditures, but if Jane Kitchell says they have the money, then I guess they have the money. So you can see a lot of other issues that are covered in here, really important responses, really important policy statements, but one time. This is very clearly not intended to be permanent changes to these programs. We'll see what this means. And the bill hasn't been passed yet. It's in the Senate right now. Really important to note, I mentioned this before, the $12.8 million for CCFAP that was in the December 20 package has not been released yet. What we're hearing is that there's going to be an informational session on this perhaps next week. And we've heard that Commissioner Brown is in the final stages of writing the rules and regs and the how it's going to happen document that's going to help us understand what's going on here. What we've heard is that it's going to be straightforward. What we've heard is that they learned the lessons from the past, that when I say they, I mean DCF, and they want to make this a very straightforward program. That's what we've heard. Time will tell. We'll know more next week. This is a little late. Technically, they were supposed to have done something about this a month ago, but I think that the rules and regs out of DC got held up. But the hope is that once this starts going, it will be relatively fast. You can see the quote. One second. You can see the quote on the page about what this is supposed to be for. I don't have details beyond that. I can't answer a lot of questions, but we'll do our best if people have questions about this, because I'm sure there might be. Yes, Shayla.
There's a quick question in the chat. Do we know to whom the justice-involved youth housing funding is being distributed?
I believe, is that justice involved? Here, yes. No, but if the person asking the question would like to send me an email separately, I am happy to research that and get back to you. So matt@vecaa.org, send me an email. I will look into it and I'll get back to you. Happy to do that kind of research for you. And if anyone has any other questions about individual points, send me an email. Once today is done, I'll go back and do the research that people are looking for. Happy to do that. Okay, so we're here. I'm not looking at the chat. Shayla, I hope you are. Are there other questions? I see that people are putting things in the chat, but I'm not looking at them so I can stay focused on the slides. Do people have other questions before we move on?
And I'll just jump in when I see them in the chat and let you know.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So the next federal package. So this is taken from a national news organization's list of what was in the bill. I think it's accurate, but I'm not 100% sure. So we've heard that there are the big checks going to go out to individuals. The unemployment assistance, unemployment insurance extension. There's a number of different nutrition related elements, housing, tax credits for families and workers. Note the very last bullet on the page. That this is the and now I'm going to make a partisan comment. The Democrats have chosen to make this bill be an anti-poverty initiative. The Republicans have criticized it for being about much, much more than COVID response. And honestly, I think that some of those criticisms are fair when read very narrowly. There are a lot of elements of this bill that are one step removed from the immediate COVID impact. And people could have a very interesting policy and philosophical debate on whether that's the right thing to do. But much like my comment of just a few moments ago, it's going to be really interesting to see if these changes are made permanent or if they're one time. And time will tell. So there are also changes to extend a paid sick and family program that is not really the one that we're looking for Vermont, and it's not a permanent solution at all, but it's better than nothing. If people have questions about that, it's a very technical issue. There's a session about that this morning, or you can be in touch with me and I'll get you in touch with the right person. There's school supports. There's more money for childcare. Changes to health insurance, small business support, aids to state and local communities, and vaccines and testing. So if you're wondering, the pressure on all this was because there's the March 14th deadline when unemployment benefits are to expire. So that's one reason why this bill was so well, it wasn't fast tracked in some ways, but that's what the press is to get it done by the end of this week. And the last estimate that I saw was about 1.3 billion with a B for Vermont. I'll pause here for a moment. Some of you have heard me say that it's going to start raining money. This is going to be an extraordinary amount of money for our state. Because of the work of the congressional delegation, there is in place in this bill what's referred to as the small state minimum. If we were to do allocations nationally based on program size or per capita or what have you, we would get relatively small appropriations in different categories that would be, in some cases, so small that they wouldn't really be worth administering at all. So that's why there's small state minimums, to make sure that smaller states get at least enough so it's worth doing the program. I have to admit, in this bill, it's kind of inflated. It's a lot, the small state minimums. And that means that we're going to get a lot of money. And there are other little kinks in this, like the fact that we don't have counties. So, and we don't have big cities. So there's all this money that we're going to get because it's by state. It just gets allocated by a formula and goes to us. We're going to get all this money. And by all this, I mean like dozens of millions of dollars that are supposed to go to counties. Well, we don't have counties. So is that going to go to regional planning commissions? Is that going to go to solid waste districts? Is that going to go to some other, to school districts? But we're going to get a huge amount of K-12 support anyway. And what about the urban allocation? Well, Burlington's about to get a huge pulse of money. I heard Mayor Weinberger talk about this on an interview yesterday. I don't think he's not saying how much it is, but it could be like 10 or 15 or $20 million, I think, just dumped into the city budget.
Matt, can you clarify what you mean when you say we don't have counties? There's a little confusion because
sorry. My apologies. Of course we have counties. Sorry, I was going too fast. We don't have a robust county government system in Vermont. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. In other parts of the country, as folks may know, counties run the Medicaid program, they run housing programs, they run all sorts of important land use programs, lots of different parts of government, trash collection, libraries, school systems. There are all sorts of things that are run by counties around the country. And they've been entirely left out of the support system that the government has set up by all these bills. So it makes sense that they would get financial supports to help with their governmental functions that are being choked off because the decline in tax revenue and the other problems with the economy. It makes sense. But in Vermont, we don't have that kind of county level social service structure. So the question is, so I'm sorry, thank you, Shayla, for asking me to clarify. So the point is that since we don't have those systems, it's not clear where. All right, I see there are things popping up in the chat. Are there other questions? Okay. Anyone ring out if you have a question. Sing out.
Matt, I do have a question. This is Beth from Bennington.
Yes, hi, Beth.
Hi. I was talking with Senator Campion in the Senate Education Committee last week, and he said that they're really looking at summer opportunities for students. And I wondered if that's supported by this federal package. What are they talking about? Are they talking about summer school? Are they talking about support for camps and programs? Do you know anything about that?
This is my bobblehead imitation, right? That's my response to a lot of these questions, which I'm going to get to in a moment. They don't know. They don't know. I do know that the folks at After School Inc. are all over this. They're doing the best they can to try to figure out how to get after school programs set up and running. Camps are such an important part of the Vermont infrastructure that I'm certain that the camp organization is trying to figure out how to get plugged into this as well. I have heard discussions about summer school. I don't know where that will be in Vermont because compared to the rest of the country, we are so much more open for schools are so much more in person. It's not universal. I'm not saying it's good, but it's not like other parts of the country where there's really very serious discussions about starting school in the middle of the summer and trying to get kids in classrooms, even if they're under tents, because it's better than nothing. But I think you'll see a lot of different initiatives. I think what I'd say
I can give a quick answer to that question.
Yes, Amy Schollenberger, please.
So hi everyone, I'm Amy Schollenberger and I represent Vermont After School as a lobbyist. So they've been working pretty hard on the summer programming. So I'm not sure about any money specifically allocated for school, summer school. We're working on summer programming outside of school. And right now, the Senate Education Committee has recommended to the Appropriations Committee to include $4 million in H315, the bill that Matt was just talking about, to support summer programming for youth across the state. And along with that, they're recommending $500,000 for summer meal support so that more children can have access to the summer meals. And Secretary French just mentioned yesterday in the Senate Education Committee that the waivers have been extended by the USDA. So we don't know exactly what that means yet, Hunger Free. I don't know if Hunger Free is on this call or not, but they could talk more about that. But the idea is to get as many children as possible into high quality summer programming. There is a team that the governor has put together that's working on figuring out how to roll it out. There's not a lot of detail yet. The money hasn't been allocated yet because the bill is still moving, but it does seem to have a fair bit of support, I believe, but I'm not 100% sure that the bucket that they're looking at for this money is ESSER 2 money, not the part that goes directly to the schools, but the part that is at the discretion of the state. So there's a small bit that comes off the top of ESSER that the state can decide how to use. It's unclear right now how it will flow or how it will get out to the programs, but all those details are likely to be worked out in the next few weeks. So stay tuned.
Thank you, Amy, for that background. That leads me to 2 points that I haven't mentioned that I want to make sure is put into the conversation. The first is that those of you who have done our general training, advocacy training session, know that one of our points is that this is a team sport, right? And so if you're interested in getting involved in these conversations, you can be sure that there is a statewide organization that's following it closely. And we're more than happy to help you make those connections. We'd encourage you to figure out who that statewide organization is and reach out to them, because just as Amy was just telling us, there's actually a lot going on in the background, way more than I could ever keep track of. And the best way for you as an individual advocate to get into the discussion is to reach out to that statewide organization and get some information and be able to plug into their conversation and their advocacy. So Beth, if that's something you want to work on, reach out to Amy directly. We're happy to help you make that connection and be part of that after school Inc. discussion. And if you want to bring other organizations in, you can be the bridge, right? You can be the bridge to other organizations to help them make the web even stronger. The second thing I want to point out that I skipped over is that most of the federal money that comes to the state, there actually isn't a requirement for the governor to work with anyone to spend it. Credit to this administration, to this governor. Right from the start, they said, we are not going to spend the money on our own. We're going to work with the legislature. We're going to work with the Joint Fiscal Committee. We're going to do as much collaborative work as we can, and we're going to do this in a partnership. They don't have to do that, but they are doing that. And so that's one of the reasons why the Joint Fiscal Committee is involved. And as you hear Amy describe it, there are different pots of money that go down different paths. It gets very complicated in terms of who's in charge of what. But I do want to make sure we give credit to the administration and to the governor for their very, very collaborative attitude, just about every single aspect of this. Not everyone, there've been a few bumps along the way, but really much, much more than most other states. And it's been a very, very collaborative process with the legislature. Shayla, I'm seeing other people post in the chat. So we'll hold here. The next slide, I'm going to have this slide be up because it's a more general slide. We'll get to this in a moment. Shayla, let's keep the questions coming.
Could this next round of CRF dollars pay for things like the BFIS replacement?
I think that, yes, Morgan Crossman has raised her hand. So Morgan, can you unmute yourself and answer that specifically? Thank you.
Sure. I just wanted to say that I asked that same exact question, and I actually reached out to Deputy Commissioner Miranda Gray to ask them to be thinking about how those funds could be used differently to support that systems level infrastructure work, specifically in the data realm, because they are really working hard to update the BFIS system. So it's on their radar, and we'll see.
Right. I think that some of the money that's already come in is targeted for the first module. I think the bottom line is, to reiterate what Morgan said, we're all on the same page here, that this is clearly a one-time infrastructure expense. We're going to use the excuse that the system is stressed and strained, and that we can't get, like, the payments that come in this next round of federal support, the CCFAP federal support. Some of that is supposed to go directly to parents and families. Well, if our computer system is all botched up, then we can't get those out the door efficiently. So we're going to use that as an excuse to update our computer system. Of course, by the time the computer system is updated, all that money will already go out the door, but that's okay. They're accepting the explanation. And so everyone's trying to pay for it as best they can. No one's scrimping. No one's trying to buy the cheap computer system here. I think we're pretty good on that one. I don't think we have the answers yet as to exactly where the money's coming from, but that's a pretty robust in the weeds conversation that's headed in a good direction. Next, Shayla.
I believe I've gotten them all. So
Okay.
if there's one that I've missed, people please speak up.
Great. And Shayla, if you would remind me, this session is done at what time?
10:50, and I've got
Okay,
a
so-
note that everyone has to read, so I'll put it in the chat later.
Great. So we've got 20 more minutes. We're most of the way through, so plenty of time for questions. Okay. So once they come to the state, these funds, this is a sort of a restatement of what we were talking about before. How is all the money going to get allocated? So there's joint fiscal committee actions. They act on an administration proposal. So there is some lobbying advocacy directly to the governor's office about some of these things. That's not where most of it is, but there are people who are trying to reach out and like wave flags and say, don't forget this thing, like the computer system, right? You know, some of those things are going directly to joint fiscal because they can do things a little bit faster and a little bit simpler than the full legislative process. So some of these things are going to get stuffed into the FY22 budget bill. Note that there could be a series of budget bills. There could be another budget adjustment bill. There could be more supplemental appropriations bills like H315, or the administration could just do stuff. It makes it kind of hard to advocate and to lobby when you aren't really sure what your target is. Which is one reason why when we get to a couple slides down, the main lesson that we learned, especially with the diaper bank money, is find a sympathetic legislator and talk to them. And and it gets back to my answer to Floyd's question. Don't get too hung up about how much money there is or where it is or where it's coming from. Just get your request onto the radar and have the insiders try to figure out where to plug in. Is there another question, Shayla? No, okay. So in theory, there are going to be some processes for all of us to talk in a more general way and to do lobbying and advocacy. And I will note that I had a conversation with the chair of this is not tooting my own horn. This is so those of you who are deep in the process can build on this, just to be clear. I had a conversation with the chair of House Appropriations yesterday about the fact that an expedited process might mean that they exclude stakeholder input, and that would be too bad. And she appreciated my pushback and said that she was going to take that to heart and try to figure out how to make sure that we all have a chance to have a voice in the process. So there will, in all likelihood, be hearings in some policy committees about exactly how these programs are designed and implemented. And that means there might be course corrections. There will probably be letters from policy committees to appropriations committees. Those of you who've been following the process over the last few weeks know that that's a very intense period of advocacy on our part to get our asks in letters from House policy committees to House appropriations. There might well be another round of those about different pots of federal money. There will be bills that we can lobby, and there might even be public hearings. So stay tuned for different opportunities to get involved in the conversation.
We've got a question, Matt.
Yes.
Is there any talk of one-time wage supplements for providers? Also curious about funds for infrastructure and building improvements that would support keeping children and teachers safe and healthy.
Yes. Well, for the first question, I think the answer is, well, there are always conversations about all of these ideas. So, there's lots of popcorning. I don't think that's on the short list right now, but hold that thought, because what's going to happen is, again, all this money is going to come in and they're going to have to figure out how to spend it. And there's to some extent a precedent here, because the rent relief got extended. I think it's like 18 months of rent supplements, because that was the only way that the state could figure out how to spend all the money that we got in a way that was acceptable. So it may well be that they, whoever they are, try to figure out how to spend all the money, and they still have money that they can't spend. And so more ideas, more sort of lavish ideas, get onto the table as possibilities. But at this point, I don't think direct payments to providers, and that also gets to the point that our system is very complex. It's related to the discussions about a property tax relief for pre-K or childcare providers. Well, that's a very, very complex puzzle. People rent, people own, they're nonprofits, they're in one location, they have multiple locations, they have different uses in different locations. It can be complicated to figure out what a provider is and what direct payment might mean. So I don't think that's necessarily at the top of the list, but it's been discussed. And the second question was about infrastructure, and I want to get to that, but Morgan, you've raised your hand. Do you want to speak to this point?
Yes, thank you. So I have been on a couple of national calls with advisors to the governor across the country, and how they are supporting childcare, and specifically how they are using relief dollars from the federal government. And one of the things that's been interesting is that Region 1 of the New England states are working together to figure out how to do that. So it's not as if every single state will do the same exact thing, but they're trying to do it in a way that is more collaborative. So that was an exciting thing for me, that they aren't just trying to figure out in their silos what to do, that they're trying to have a more collaborative approach across the board. And then the second is that we are hosting a webinar next week. I hope you all know about this already, to support DCF in talking about their new grant opportunity, specifically for additional dollars. So if anyone needs that information, I'm happy to provide that.
I did mention that. I had heard reference to that just the other day, so I added it to the slide deck. I believe it's on the 16th, but I don't have any details about it. So Morgan, please get your PR team cranked up after today and get the word out about that. We're happy to spread the word as well.
Absolutely.
So I want to answer the infrastructure question, and then Shayla, I'm guessing there's another question, and then I need to go a little faster to make sure we get to the end of the slide deck. So the infrastructure question, actually, what I'm going to do with the infrastructure question, was that Vicky Senni who asked that question? Because yeah, okay, Vicky, hold that thought, Vicky, because we're going to talk about that when we get to a future slide. Okay, we'll get there. Yes, Shayla, another question.
Yes. Do you know what the chances are that unemployment supplemental funds will be extended?
Ooh. No, I don't know the answer to that question. Is there anyone in the array of tiles who has an answer about unemployment insurance? Whoever asked the question, oh, Amy asks, do you have an
I
answer?
have a very vague answer. Sorry, let me pause this. A very vague answer, which is it's super confusing and changing by the minute. And we're really trying to get a handle on it, but it's super unclear. Yesterday alone, we heard 4 different stories in 4 different meetings of senators as to how much is in the trust fund, what they're trying to do, who they're trying to help, and bill drafts are not always readily available.
This is not an issue that there's a clear organizational lead. So if someone would like to have a connection on that, you again, email me privately after the event today is done, and I'll do my best to try to track that for you. All right, Shayla, can we move on? Great. Okay. So here, let me just, yes, okay. This is the last slide except for the information, the contact slide. So this is, I want to spend the rest of our time here, and Vicki, we're going to get the answer to your question. So this is called funding for special projects, but it probably shouldn't be called special projects. It's funding for whatever it is you want to do. So this is where we get to the pointers for what you should be doing if you want to get into this conversation. The first thing is to get your proposal together, right? It has to be pretty clear what it is you're asking for. It has to be related to COVID impacts. It cannot be an ongoing program. And you have to have as many details as you can ready to go to explain it. Now, the caveat to that is what happened with the diaper bank funding, which is that we did have most of the answers thanks to Amanda's work. She actually did have most of the answers, but the conversation went so fast that once it got on the track, it just whooshed away, and we didn't actually have to answer a lot of questions because they didn't ask them. So just because you have your ducks in a row doesn't mean you're going to get a chance to talk about them, but you better have your ducks in a row in case they ask you about them. And this is something that I'm more than happy to work with people on. And this is Vicki and I, to her question, she and I were talking about this. What about the idea of having some kind of infrastructure fund or something to help pay for the ongoing costs? And who knows what it's going to look like in the fall. You know, we're going to try to get back to normal, but there'll probably be some more infrastructure stuff that will be more permanent. So in order to move a proposal forward, you need to have some sense of the statewide impact, some sense of who would benefit, and it would be really great if you can tie it back to some clear regulation or requirement that is on the books. So if you can say, look, in order to comply with Rule 22 of the temporary COVID response requirements, we all have to buy 50,000 blue wipes. And the blue wipes, we approximate that each mental health provider has to buy 25 packages of them. So there are 12 mental health providers in the state. Divide it, the math equals this. It's just a guess, but that's why we're asking for $450,000. I just made all that up, obviously, right? But you want to try to line all that out, at least on the back of a napkin, and write it up in a memo. And then send it to someone like me or Amy Schoenberger or Morgan Crossman or one of us who've been having these conversations. Send it to one of us and have us look it over. But that's where you have to have it at least half baked. And then talk to legislators. We went over the members of the Appropriations and Joint Fiscal, talked to the key policy committees, ask them to watch for opportunities to fund your program. And that's what happened, coming back to this, that's what happened with the diaper bank. That Amanda and I have been talking about this. Sorry, I keep talking about it because it just happened. I'm very excited about it. So just to give you the story, Amanda and I have been talking about this, and Charlie Glisserman, our public engagement director previous to Dan, we were helping to incubate this idea. We've been working on it for a long time. We encouraged Amanda to have an ask ready to go. She sent the ask off to Ann Pugh, the chair of the House Human Services Committee, just to see if it could get in the conversation. It never did. I told her, don't give up. Let's figure out who else to talk to. We said, well, we really should talk to Senator Westman because he's in the middle of all this. And I said, who can get to Westman? Floyd can get to Westman. We pulled Floyd in the conversation. Turns out that Floyd's program benefits from the diaper bank program, and he was a big supporter. I'm talking about these people like they don't exist. I know you're actually on this session, so thank you to you all. And Floyd was able to get Richie's attention, sent him the memo that Amanda wrote to Ann, and Richie just took it and ran, talked to the chair of Senate Appropriations, and got the money. Yeah, now it's not final, but we think it's going to be in the Senate version of H315, and it should go. That happened because we were able to talk to a key legislator and ask them. The ask was, can you look for places where funding might be available? We didn't say, stick it into this bill. We didn't say, we want the money from this source. We just said, we need CRF funding. Can you help us find it? And that's how I would think most of these asks should be phrased. Amy S. is doing a lot of this work as well. She might have some observations. Let me just quickly run through these last points and then we'll open it up to questions. You should consider whether you qualify for some of these restricted funds or need unrestricted funds. As we find out more about these details, particularly about the webinar next week that BBF is holding, we find out about the CCF money. We'll know more about that. The school money, we'll know more about what's in the new bill and what the school funding is for. That could be peeled off. We don't know what the county stuff is going to be. So some of these restricted funds may actually have a lot of play in them that you could ask for. Or there's a lot of unrestricted money that's just sort of sloshing around. The last is watch for updates. Things are going to change. We don't even know if in theory, the federal package is going to be signed today or tomorrow, but there's going to be a lot of developments along the way. So let me stop there. We've got about 7 minutes. So let's see if we can race through the rest of the questions quickly. Shayla, go.
Nope, you're good. We've got a couple of comments, but no questions right now.
Okay. All right. So that's the end of the presentation, except to share my contact information. So, which all of you know. So I'm going to go back to this slide. And does anyone have a question or a comment?
It's Linda, January. I just have a question as far as I know reaching out and talking with legislators is really important with all of this, but it also feels like leadership at CDD and who are the people at CDD right now heading all of these efforts up, and who are the people that we should be in touch with?
Okay, so I'm going to do something I've never done before. Morgan, I'm going to make you, I've never done this before. I don't know. And our best, and this is not meant to any CDD or DCF people who are on this call, I'm not trying to disrespect you at all. What I'm suggesting is that if you want to try to figure out what's happening in those conversations, you get in touch with Morgan at BBF. And Morgan, I didn't ask you if I could do that, but I'm doing that.
That's fine. I'm happy to be a liaison. And I'm also, I'm happy to say DCF and CDD specifically does have an interim deputy commissioner. Miranda Gray is in that role. Melissa Regal-Garrett is serving in a policy director role. So they are supporting DCF in moving through these efforts, as well as Sheila Duranlo. And they are doing the best they can. But I think, I'm happy to be that liaison and provide any questions, comments, ideas to them. I'm also, happy to connect people directly to them.
Right. Morgan has a lot on her plate already, but Linda, I think I just want to be responsive to sort of reading between the lines. It can be frustrating for those of you who are line staff, field people who have really great ideas. And honestly, sometimes the legislators and administrators aren't as responsive to those ideas when they come from, just someone, as opposed to when they come through some of these folks who have different kinds of connections. So, but Morgan's right. There are staff there. They're doing hard work. They are trying to listen to you. But if you're finding that it's hard to make those connections, reach out to one of us and we can help you make the connections. But
I think the bigger question was who are those people? Because there hasn't been that I have seen any sort of announcement around who that new leadership is. And just wondering, I know that Melissa is there and thankful for her being there, but I'm just wondering who, I know she's not the only one, and wondering who those other people are supporting this effort.
Morgan, maybe take the feedback and suggest that CDD put out some sort of missive that we can share that just says, okay, here's the team, and we're open for business. I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
All right. Shayla, other questions? No. Okay. Other comments that people have? All right. So let me just restate. Well, I don't know if we ever have stated. So the purpose of this session is not only to help you have information for your own individual work and your organizational work, but also to help you approach legislators. We have a pretty nice turnout of legislators. We're doing our best to figure out how to get the tables set up. Unfortunately, it's a Zoom conversation, so you can't have multiple conversations in the room at the same time as you would at a table. But we're doing our best to help match you all up with legislators from your region. If you're a local person, and if you're a statewide person, you might get assigned to a table just because there's more room in that, and there's more space in that room. The idea here is so to help you frame your ask at noon, so that when you talk to a legislator, you have the language that you need to talk to them in a way that they can hear you. Right? That's so we'd encourage you to think about all of this content through that lens. That will help you be heard, and hopefully get your idea onto the table.
And there are lunch facilitators in each group to help you sort of make a plan ahead of time also.
And the last thing I'd add is that as I think those of you who are veterans of ECDL know, that over the last few years, we've tried really hard to make this be not just a one-day, one-off thing. We want this to be part of an ongoing relationship that you have with your legislators. And so even if you don't get a chance to bring it up today, we hope that you'll get a chance to talk to them at some other time. They're really struggling to stay connected to the community, but all of them really want to. So they're trying hard to stay connected, and keep emailing them, keep trying to connect with them. And if you're having trouble, get in touch with one of us and we'll help you make that connection.
So I just popped something in the chat and I want to make sure everyone sees it. So I'm going to read it also. The next step is really important. So you're going to use the Whova agenda to navigate into your next session, and you're going to join the live session before you take your short break. That's really important. So please make sure to click view live stream before your break. And thank you guys so much for joining.
All right. So I guess that wraps it up. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the great questions. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your advocacy on all the different issues that everyone's working on. Really appreciate the broad cross-section of things that people are working on. If you have any questions, let us know. The slide deck is on the Whova site, so you can download it there. We'll do everything we can to make this work for you. We are going to send out an evaluation form so that you can give us feedback on how this went. We hope that we never have to do it this way again, but your feedback's very helpful for future virtual events. Okay. Anything else, Sheila?
Wonderful. Nope, that's it. Thank you so much, all.
Okay. So you should push the leave button, right?
Yep, I'm going to end the meeting for everyone, and then everyone goes to Whova and gets into their next one.
Great. Okay.
Bye.